What is going on, you guys? So today I'm coming to you with a GenCon prediction video for Star Wars Armada. So, we haven't had any news for Armada in a long time, and as the weeks go by, every passing Friday, where we're hoping for something and we keep seeing some stuff for other games, it has me more and more convinced they're just going to make us wait until GenCon. So I think that's one of the things. Fortunately, Armada's in a good enough place right now that the game is strong. And there's really no meta. It's in a place where just about any ship is viable. There's a list for everything. There's nothing that can't work. So that's a really good thing. The last FAQ fixed a lot of things, so the game is in a good spot. There's really not too many things that really need fixing. But I'm going to talk to you about some of my predictions. So, as you know, last year at GenCon they said something big was coming for GenCon. Or rather, coming for Armada. And not long after that, Wave 7 was announced. And, a lot of people thought that that was the big thing. But then at the last, big Q&A that they had, somebody said, hey, was that something big, or is there still something big coming? And they said that, yeah, there was still something big coming, but they couldn't say any more than that. So the something big has been apparently in development for a long time. So that's what I'm going to talk about first. What is this something big? Now, something big could mean a ton of different things. For one, it could mean a drastic restructuring of the game. It could mean an increased point limit. It could mean a second edition. I don't think it's going to be any of those. Although maybe we'll see an increased point limit, but that's not the something big. I don't think that is the answer. I think that may come along with it. I think it's going to be Super Star Destroyers. I think we're going to see the Executor, or rather the Executor. It's the Executor. I think we're going to see the Executor show up. The Executor class Star Destroyer, it's an entire class. So they could actually have lots of different titles for it. And there's a number of reasons why I think this is coming. First off, it's iconic. It's canon. It's high canon. I mean, it's from the original movies, so it's like as iconic as you can get. Well, almost as iconic as you can get. That being said, it was also a really important ship, and I think in a game all about capital ships, you don't want to exclude like the biggest, baddest capital ship that's ever been seen on screen. It's important in a number of places, and also I really think it's coming because we haven't seen Piet yet. And people can talk about, and actually I chose this photo because this one is out of scale. Like the Super Star Destroyer is in the background here, and the Imperial Star Destroyer is in the foreground. It's in it because it's actually much larger. It's not twice the size of a Star Destroyer. It's much more than that. However, scale is a thing, right? And so it could be like in the back. So here's I think this was a Mel Miniatures Super Star Destroyer, and it's gonna be about 2 feet long, which is great. I think maybe just over 2 feet long, using 2 large bases, with a little space between them, and then it's gonna extend farther beyond that. Gameplay mechanics wise, that's gonna work. It'll be a little tricky. I think what will end up happening is they'll probably have to do a custom base for it, because trying to move that thing is going to be tricky. Or they could make it even bigger than that. And if they make it even bigger, like if they make it closer to like 2.5 to almost 3 feet, I have a feeling it probably won't move. But here's the thing. People are saying, well, a Super Star Destroyer is much too strong for the game. It couldn't work. Well, there's a lot of different ways that they can make it work. You have to be a little creative. And it's worth it to be a little creative just so you can get this awesome thing on the tabletop. So one of the ways that they can do is they can make it a campaign. It could be, it could be a Super Star Destroyer pack, and it comes with all this stuff about like how it's a Rebel versus Imperial campaign. Imperials are trying to build another Super Star Destroyer, and the Rebels are trying to attack the shipyards and stop it from being built. And at a certain point, the Empire might actually get it fielded, and then maybe the Rebels, maybe it becomes a team thing where one Imperial player is just playing the Super Star Destroyer, and everybody else is, and the other Imperial player is playing a small flotilla helping defend it, while 2 Rebel players get like 500 points each to come after the Super Star Destroyer. You could balance it in a campaign because you'd have custom rules there. Additionally, for just regular play, you can have different cards that represent its strength. So it doesn't have to be a full strength Super Star Destroyer. you could have a Super Star Destroyer under construction. Now you still have something that's huge on the field and probably still has a lot of hull, but might have limited weapons. Could have maybe the weapon equivalent of a Victory Star Destroyer if it's in the early stages of construction. So it might only have a few turbo laser batteries online. Possibly. That being said, you could have multiple different cards. You could have an under beginning construction, mid-level construction, and complete. And maybe the version that's complete is a 400-point card all by itself. And maybe a game point limit gets raised up to 500 points to support something like that. And if you're going to field a fully constructed Super Star Destroyer, you're not going to have much room for anything else. So it used to be like a Super Star Destroyer and maybe a Gladiator, and you're done, or something like that, or a Super Star Destroyer and a couple of TIE Fighters, and you're done. Or maybe you go with a weaker Super Star Destroyer and an ISD to back it up. So maybe there's different ways that you could try to balance something like that within the confines of the game. That being said, I don't know how it would happen, but I know there's a lot of different ways to approach it, but so many people are very dismissive of the entire concept just because, yes, if it were perfectly to scale, it would be incredibly huge and would go from one edge of the board to the other edge of the board. But there's a sliding scale already in the game, and I'm willing to suspend my disbelief and kind of, space is three-dimensional, and that's one of the ways that you can get around that, is just to say, okay, well, if they're right here and I'm looking from above, well, maybe the Super Star Destroyer is way down here, so that's why it doesn't, look quite that big. Still, I mean, it's more of a tactical game. As much as I like the theme, I'm also in this game for the mechanics and the play style and the tactics of it. So having just bigger ships is kind of fun. It's fun to move a giant ship across the field, trying to protect it and take advantage of its strengths while not having your opponent exploit its weaknesses. It's a lot of fun. So anything that's going to get me more new tactics and more new things on the tabletop, I'm definitely down for it. Especially from an Imperial player's perspective, because we really kind of didn't get any new ships in the last wave, right? It was just more Imperial Star Destroyers. So you still fly them kind of the same. They have different strengths and weaknesses, but it doesn't change the components all that much. Still cool stuff, and I get that because it's more thematic. You want more ISDs on the board with the Empire. It makes sense. I'm fine with that. But Piet is another reason. He is the most iconic admiral after Tarkin, right? Or I should say officer, because Tarkin wasn't admiral. He was a Grand Moff or governor. But yeah. So Piet is. He's like one of the top guys, and we've got so many other people. We've got Mahdi and Tag, and we got Screed, for crying out loud. We got Screed before Piet. So the executor was, or the executor was Piet's flag. He was the captain of that ship, and then he became the admiral. That was where he was stationed. He was there. He was on board. That was his ship. Was Vader's flagship, but he was, the captain of the ship as well as being an admiral, captain by position, not by rank. Anyway, I'm getting convoluted here. If we haven't seen Piet yet, that kind of tells you that this ship is coming. Granted, maybe it's going to be a long time, but I think Piet would be a really cool commander, because I would imagine his most famous line is, intensify forward batteries. I don't want anything getting through. Cause intensify forward firepower, right? Now, you already have an intensify firepower card. Now, that one doesn't say intensify forward firepower. And I think the lack of the term forward there is twofold. For one, it's just meant to be, a generic term. But the thing is, Piet's key line is intensify forward firepower. My prediction is that Piet would function similar to how Akbar functions for the Rebels. That Piet would be a forward die increaser. He would have an ability very similar to Akbar, but perhaps maybe only one extra die. Maybe something like that. Or maybe only at medium range. Or there might even be a restriction where it doesn't work at close range. Maybe you have to be at long range to use it, and that because the theme here is that that A-Wing got through and they couldn't take him out. Maybe he was too close. But I imagine Piet would be basically an Akbar asymmetric kind of counterpart to Akbar for the Empire, dealing with frontal arcs. And in the theme here is that he's saying intensify forward firepower. That's what I imagine Piet would be doing. The only other thing I think it could be is maybe like he's like, oh, we only need to stop them from escaping. But I think you've already got people doing that. The Interdictor expansion brought all of that stuff in, and you've got Constantine who can kind of do that. So I think Piet will be intensifying forward firepower. Now there's multiple different Super Star Destroyers as well, and so you could actually have different titles. I don't know if they would do different titles for that. I don't know if it's needed, but if you were looking at symmetry for like what would the Rebels have, right? Good question. Very good question. I'm going to talk about that. Now, there are three that are, I think, the most important Executor class Super Star Destroyers. The first is the Executor itself, which we know that one went down at the Battle of Endor. Next is the Ravager. So the Ravager is the one we see in Episode 7, crashed in Jakku. This was, for the Aftermath trilogy, it was the only Super Star Destroyer the Empire had left after the Battle of Endor, and when it was the one they were all fighting over. It was Sloane's ship. She was, she had control of this one for a little while. Gallius Rax was involved in this. They could potentially also do Gallius Rax. I mean, it could be an expansion that has multiple commanders, although I'm not really super thrilled about Gallius Rax. He wasn't like one of my favorite characters, and the Aftermath books weren't really that good either, but they did have some good characters in them, specifically Ray Sloane, but they didn't introduce her. They were using an existing character. But also, there is another one called the Annihilator that was captured by pirates, and I think that one would be really nice. And so that one, and it was captured by pirates, and they eventually renamed it Liberty's Misrule. And so it's possible, and they were kind of benevolent. They were kind of good, kind of like Hondo Anaka type of pirates. So it is in theory possible that if you use that particular title, you could have Rebels fielding a Super Star Destroyer as well. So it could be one of those packs that has an option for the Rebels to capture one and use it as well. And that could even be part of the campaign, or you could just have the cards where you could play regular matches with the Rebels being able to use a captured Super Star Destroyer as well. That's a possibility. I think it'd be kind of cool. I don't really think they'll do that, though. I think that at a certain point, they kind of want to appeal to the broader fans and not everybody who's read every single book. And so, a Rebel Super Star Destroyer might seem a little too, avant-garde. So I have an alternative, and it also comes from the same book. And that's the Starhawk, the Nadiri Starhawk. And this thing, and by the way, this image is from N.J. Butler from the FFG forums. He posted this, so I want to give him credit. But this is, this is just a concept because we don't really know. All we know about this ship is that it's awesome and that the front of it resembles a hatchet. And so a lot of people were thinking kind of like a Nebulon, but more, with more Mon Cala design influence. It was made from destroyed Imperial ships after the Battle of Endor and everything they could salvage. These are the newest ships in the New Republic's fleet at the time of the Battle of Jakku. So this is still kind of in that Galactic Civil War time frame, so it's still, I think, fair game for Star Wars Armada. Now, one thing about this is these were the top of the line for the New Republic, or the Rebels, or however you want to look at it. And these things were really, really strong. These were considered to be, as far as firepower, they were supposed to be about a match for an Imperial Star Destroyer, which was a big deal because the Rebels really couldn't beat Star Destroyers. They were just kind of, even their best ships couldn't beat a Star Destroyer one-on-one. They had to rely on their fighters and hit and run tactics and stuff to really take them down. But this thing, in just a straight slugfest, would be able to beat a Star Destroyer potentially. Now that being said, it also was supposed to have stronger shields, but the claim to fame on this thing is its tractor beam, which is like 10 times as strong as a Star Destroyer's. So special tractor beams. And that's is basically how they took down the Ravager, is that one of these things used its tractor beam in conjunction with, you know, a coordinated strike targeting the engines. So they kind of weakened the Ravager just enough that this thing could actually pull it down to Jakku with its tractor beam as it was going down. And I think if they did this, you would have you had a certain Krista Agate. Krista Agate was the Commodore who was leading the Starhawk that actually pulled down the Ravager. So that would make a good commander to come with one of these. And if this was released at the same time as a Super Star Destroyer, and again, we don't know if it's going to look like this. It probably won't look exactly like this, but maybe something like this. And it would be really exciting to finally see what it looks like, because nobody will show you what this thing looks like. And I don't know what the holdup is. Maybe it's going to be in one of these new movies, or maybe this is, you know, something that they've been keeping a secret held tight to their chest. But this would be a great counterpart to a Super Star Destroyer. Think of it like this. Oh, well, the Empire has this new Super Star Destroyer. The Rebels have a ship that's stronger than an ISD, but that's still no match for a Super Star Destroyer. But instead, the Rebels field 3 of these, and now, you know, now we can talk. It's still not an even match, but now there's a fighting chance. So 3 of these, plus some squadrons, maybe like a CR-90 and a couple of other fighters, you know, Y-Wings, B-Wings, and X-Wings and stuff, you know, all attacking. Now you might have an even match. And so it's that asymmetry where that balance yet not perfect symmetry, which is kind of one of the things that Armada is all about. So I think the Starhawks would be a great option, you know, to be a counter to the Executor, and that's if they don't give the Rebels the ability to use an Executor. That being said, that's you know, that's kind of what I am thinking for this, something big. So there is some other stuff that that could be also coming. Let's talk about, like, if they just do regular expansions. Like, let's say, and this actually could be one of the reasons why we haven't gotten news in so long, because maybe they're waiting for Lucasfilm to give them the final approval on the design of this thing. Because don't forget, they have to sculpt it. They have to come up with the art. I don't know if Lucasfilm had the art yet. Do you remember the Raider for X-Wing? So, you know, you had like a little history lesson. X-Wing had, you know, huge ships for the Rebels, but had no huge ships for the Empire for the longest time. And that's one of the reasons why Epic Play really never took off, because there was no Imperial version. And then all of a sudden, after like a year or two of waiting, we get this, oh, boom, here's the Raider Corvette. And everybody was like, whoa, you know, and it was this whole new thing that they collaborated with Lucasfilm to make. And now Raiders are everywhere. They're in Battlefront 2, they're all over the place. So could be a similar situation where FFG worked with Lucasfilm to maybe make, you know, the Nadiri Starhawk. That'd be cool. I would love that. But that would also explain why it took so long, why they were talking about it last GenCon, and we're not going to see it for a year later. Maybe not even. Heck, it might not even be ready by this GenCon. I would imagine that they would still mention something, and maybe they just can't, you know, show off this. They might at least show the Super Star Destroyer and not this. Who knows? But they got to tell us something. It can't go, you know, 2 years, you know, telling us something big is coming. So anyway, let's talk about regular expansions. First off, I want to talk about Rebels. Dornian gunship. It seems like the most likely candidate for a Rebel ship. It's, you know, it was in the original movies, it was in Star Wars Rebels, and it was in Rogue One. Thing is everywhere. Now, for the longest time, I've always thought that this one was coming for the longest time. I always thought it'd be a small ship, just like a Corellian Corvette. But the problem is that I actually looked this thing up, and it's almost the exact same size as a Rebel transport, a GR-75. So you can't really make this a small ship. You could, but it seems a lot more appropriate for this to come in the form of a flotilla. Now, what lends some credence to that is because these are gunships, right? This is an attack craft. If these guys came in the form of a flotilla, it would probably be like a combat flotilla. I was recently talking about combat flotillas in this Guzanti build I did not that long ago. And this could be the Rebels' real version of that, because they have the combat retrofit for GR-75s, but those aren't really that strong. This could be, you know, a combat flotilla that has maybe 2 or even 3 dice in its frontal arc, but I would imagine they probably wouldn't have a scatter. You know, they're about there to shoot and like maybe go on suicide missions. maybe they'll have a brace, maybe not. Maybe they'll have, they'll probably have the evade and maybe the redirect and a brace or something like that. Or maybe not even a brace, maybe just an evade and 2 redirects, 2 shields, 1, and then 0 in the back or something like that. Something, basically kind of fragile, but a combat flotilla. And maybe that's another reason why we have the flotilla limit, because a lot of people were looking at the flotilla nerf and saying, well, all right, guys, you did it. You did overkill. First off, you nerfed relay back to a position where it was supposed to be, no problem. But second off, the second thing is that you made it to where flotillas don't count for being tabled. So I don't even have to kill your flotillas and I can still beat you. So that's huge, right? So that being said, why then take that extra step and then limit flotillas to only 2? And on top of all those nerfs, even farther back, you nerfed it to where commanders can't be on flotillas. So you don't need a flotilla limit of only 2. You've already disincentivized people from running more than 2 anyway. But maybe I wanted to run 3, because I bought 3 Gazantes a long time ago, and I can't run 3 Gazantes anymore, at least in a tournament game. And now, granted, you can run them in a casual game, but I don't really want to do that. Like maybe in a campaign. But I view casual games from a certain point of view almost as tournament practice. So I don't want to practice for a tournament using a list that I could never legally play in a tournament. That just, it seems a little strange. I mean, maybe once in a while, I don't know. Sometimes you do custom games. Sometimes you do 800-point games, or even maybe a 1,000-point game here and there. But yeah, so I think these guys will be a combat flotilla, and I think that was part of the reason why we'll see, we've seen this limit of only 2 flotillas, because maybe they'll be good enough that their fear was that you just spam like 10 of them, and and then 1 CR90 and fly your commander around. Maybe they'll have good side arcs, and you're afraid people will just go Akbar flotillas like crazy. So that's what I think. I think these guys are coming. I don't know if they'll be the next wave. I hope that they don't just announce another 2-ship wave. Next, I think another candidate is probably, your Assault Frigate Mark 1. I mean, that's a lot of people are talking about that. I think that's a likely candidate. Very popular in the EU. I think this is actually a screen cap from the Force Unleashed 2. So again, popular ship. I could go either way on it though. It's not hard canon right now. It's not like we've seen this on screen in one of the films, like we have with the Dornian gunship, but I think this is a possibility. Another possibility would be that DP-20 gunship. That was been a real popular one for a long time. I don't like the DP-20. I don't care if they make it. That's fine. I think the Rebels have enough small ships as is, so I would rather see one of these. But the DP-20, okay, that's fine. A lot of people are big fans of this. To me, it looks like a blow dryer or something. It looks very like 70s ship. And this was originally, the original Millennium Falcon was originally supposed to look something like this. So that's kind of where it came from. But much too ugly. Much too ugly for me. Not a super big fan of this one. All right, so next up, we'll go back to what's canon now. All right, so we've got this Imperial listening ship that showed up in Star Wars Rebels. Now, at first glance, you might say, well, that's just a Gazanti with a radar. It's a little more because the engines are slightly different. It has extra engines. This is the IGV-55 surveillance vessel. It's, again, almost just like a Gazanti, but it's slightly different. And so here's the thing. If they're going to do combat flotillas, right, and if they do, and I think this will work as at least part of a wave, either a small wave or half of a wave. If you do the Dornian gunships for the Rebels, that's the Rebels version of a combat flotilla, and now they have GR-75 as a support flotilla, right? So then you do these guys. These guys are going to be your support flotilla for the Empire. And then I'm sure there will be something that you can put on your Gazantis to make them more of a combat flotilla. Maybe some kind of offensive retrofit that, just synergizes really well with a Gazanti. Like synergizes, like if you only roll 1 die, you can add, another die set to a side with a hit, for every attack or something like that. Who knows? But it's just something that synergizes really well with the Gazantis that are already there. And then this one would have maybe an extra fleet support option or some titles that just really make it support the fleet. And again, this would factor into that 2 Gazanti limit, because if they come up with some new cards or some new crew or some new upgrades that really make the other Gazanti way better, people would be more likely to want to spam those. And so now you're going to have to make that choice. But do you want this really cool new support ship? But now you can't have 2 of these new combat Gazanti configurations, and so. I think this is a definite option. It was in one episode of Rebels, but it could work. But the only thing that's not great about this is, like, flotillas are kind of small, and sometimes people want bigger stuff. The Empire could use more small ships, but with a limit of only 2 flotillas, I'm not super crazy about the idea of them coming out with with more flotillas when I can only use 2. So that much kind of frustrates me. Some more Imperial stuff. All right, Venator. I definitely think the Venator's got to be coming at some point in time. The Empire used them. They're in a ton of books during the Galactic Civil War. The only hiccup is that they're also heavily featured in the Clone Wars, but they were used in both periods. You had a Venator, a plaque of a Venator behind Tarkin. It's an Imperial Venator, by the way. In Star Wars Rebels, it's been many of the books they've used Venators, so I think Venators are definitely coming. It would be a great medium ship. The Empire could use, a big broadside medium ship. I think that would work out really, really well, kind of like the assault frigate for the Rebels. I think a Venator could be that powerhouse broadside ship, especially if Piet is coming. Now you'll have some more choices to make, because right now, if Piet comes out, obviously you're going to go with forward arc ships. But if you've got this new side arc ship that's also cool, now you'll have to make some more tough decisions, and I'm all about that. Also, the Carrion Spike. The Carrion Spike was, all about the Tarkin novel. Was all about the Carrion Spike. It's this stealth corvette that Tarkin had. This was also in the Clone Wars. I don't think it was exactly the same one or not, but basically it's another small ship that the Empire can have, and the Empire doesn't have that many small ships available. So I think the Carrion Spike is a very likely thing that could be coming at some point, and also could introduce a whole new mechanic of cloaking. Although I think if it's going to cloak, there should only be the one, because it was kind of a rarity. They had the Stygium crystals in there, and and it was a big deal that it could cloak, and that's what it was, a very special ship. So I think the Carrion Spike would maybe be a unique, only one ship that could cloak, and I don't know how they would do cloaking in Armada, but I imagine it wouldn't be that hard. Several games have done different versions of cloaking, like maybe you can do a free move one way or the other. Maybe you automatically get to cancel like up to 2 dice when somebody's attacking you if you're cloaked, but you can't shoot while you're cloaked, something like that. I don't know. And then, of course, if they want to be superstars, they could do the Imperial Support Vessel, which that's what it's called now, but it's a dreadnought. It's a dreadnought. And these were featured in the finale of Star Wars Rebels. They were just kind of there in the background. They didn't really talk about them. There was no exposition into these things. So they're kind of wide open right now. Now they are almost identical to the dreadnoughts from, the Katana fleet, from the Thrawn trilogy, from all the EU, the dreadnoughts that we've seen forever. Definitely want these. But the problem is, they've only seen them for the Empire, but in the EU, they were famous because they were used by both sides in the Thrawn trilogy and Heir to the Empire. And so, also, this would be a great opportunity to do something with these guys to maybe make Garm Bel Iblis better again. So maybe give them, if they're a dual faction ship, if they do come out with a 2-pack that has a Rebel version and an Imperial version of these, which everybody, as far as I know, would be very happy with something like that. Maybe give it something that allows it to take it. They get a bonus for having more tokens. You can cash in any token when you're shooting to add a die. So like when Garm gives it, 3 tokens or whatever at this, then it can cash those in and get extra dice from it. I don't know, but since Garm Bel Iblis was very important in that storyline from the EU, it would be a nice nod if these came out and the Rebels could use them as well as the Empire, because it would also, if it had something to do with tokens, then Tarkin would have some effect on it also, but then so would Garm. So that would be kind of cool. Would like to see something like that. Now, I've talked about a lot about different specific expansions that might happen. I want to talk to you about one of the biggest needs that Armada has right now, and the biggest barrier to entry is cost. Is the core set is so freaking expensive, and you get so little in it. That's the number one reason people don't start playing Armada, is because it costs $100 just for this core set, and if you're only playing one faction, then you're stuck paying $100 for like a victory, and maybe you're not even going to use a victory in your games. So they need something like what Rune Wars has, and it's this Essentials pack that just has has the rules, has the dice, has the damage deck, has the movement tools, has the cardboard, your obstacles and stuff like that. It's just a cheap core set with no units. That's what this game needs. It needs an Essentials pack. I definitely think it does. I think that would be huge. I think that would be, it wouldn't be as big a deal for us, unless, of course, maybe it came with something else. Maybe it comes with some cards like, some new titles for other ships or whatever. But I think that's the wrong idea. I think if you're going to make an Essentials pack, you make it just Essentials. That's it. And so the only reason to get it is if you want the box, right? So I think an Essentials pack would be huge. It would help get more people into the game because they can buy the expansions they want a la carte. It would also open the door for another thing that would be big news for the game, and that's just doing new factions. The sequel factions are definitely a possibility, because then you again, that's the problem, is if they're going to add new factions, you're stuck buying a core set that has stuff for factions that you're never going to use. Maybe you just want to play the First Order, right? Now, I don't think they're going to do sequel trilogy factions just yet, because I think we don't have enough, there's not enough First Order ships out there. And we probably have just about enough Resistance ships to get started, but I think I'd rather wait until after Episode 9 before we do those factions, because we'll have a lot more ships. I'm expecting a huge space battle in Episode 9, so I think this would be a great time to launch into Clone Wars stuff. Especially if you're already doing a Venator. Right, you already have so many ship molds done for the Old Republic's fleet. You'd have the Venator, the Pelta, the Architans, all staples of the Old Republic fleet. You have a couple others. There's the Acclimator. There's a couple other ships that would work in the Old Republic fleet, and but you can easily do about 5 or 6 different ships there, and have some depth. And that'd be great. Again, if you're gonna have like 4 factions in the game or more, or even 6 someday, not every faction needs to have 12, 14 ships. You can have some factions that only have like 6 or 7 different ships, and that's fine because you're still gonna have diversity. So I would love to see that. There's just so many options, and the CIS has a pretty good number of options too. Squadrons could be tremendously strong, and that could actually be one of the strengths. Like the CIS had some really big ships, like they had that Malevolence, for example, which was nasty. That would be a really fun one because that could have this huge blue dice attack with that giant ion cannon that it had. Battlefront has some really great, Clone Wars era battles, but that could be one of the Old Republic's strengths. So if you figure like Venators and Architans are kind of older ships that might not be, even though I'm personally in love with the Architans, but they might not be as new as the Empire stuff. Their biggest strength could be in that their clone troopers who are flying ARC 170s or whatever, they might have the best squadrons because those guys have better training than stormtroopers and TIE pilots do. That is because they're also way more expensive it was very expensive to build a clone army, right? So that could be, how you balance things. It's maybe like, okay, well, sure, the Old Republic didn't have, the technology that the Empire had, but they had better trained, pilots in their squadrons. And so that could be, again, you have asymmetry. Not everything has to be the same. And that'd be a lot of fun, and this Lucre Hulk might be a little bit too big. I don't know. I would love to see it on the board. And that's another ship that doesn't have to move. That could just stay there, Or that, if it's too big, though, they might end up doing it as like cardboard. It could be just a piece of cardboard that's like an objective. I don't know. I'm all about having real big ships on the board, though. I think it's a lot of fun to do that. So that's, I think, all of my predictions. That's about it. So let me know what you guys think. And there's still time to enter to win that big X-Wing giveaway. I'm doing my 3 of those conversion kits. So just have to become a subscriber and leave a comment on the video. I want to thank all of my patrons. You guys are very awesome, and that's why you guys are getting this video first. So this is just another way to say thank you for you guys. Also, I am going to be doing some more giveaways for Patreon. So if you haven't already, check out my Patreon as well. That'll be happening in July. So that is coming up very soon. Dice Tower Con is going to be July 4th weekend, so if you're watching this after that, I hope you had a good time. If it's not then, if you're going to be in Orlando, come to Dice Tower Con, say hi. And we'll see you guys at GenCon in August, so hopefully that is going to be giving us all the news that we want to see. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day.